The blood didn't look like it did in the movies. It wasn't bright red paint. It was dark, thick, and it ruined the pristine white tablecloth of Chicago's most exclusive restaurant in seconds. But Donovan Ricci didn't care about the mess. He didn't care about the chaotic screaming of the patrons or the shattered glass. All the most feared man in the city could see was the small, trembling waitress bleeding out on the floor, her body curled protectively around his children. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't asked for money. She just jumped, and as Donovan looked at her pale face, he realized the woman he had treated like dirt was the only angel in a room full of devils. Cassidy Miller was invisible. It was a survival mechanism she had perfected over 3 years working at Le Ciel, the kind of high-end steakhouse in downtown Chicago, where a single bottle of wine cost more than her rent. If she was invisible, the customers couldn't complain about her. If she was invisible, the manager, a sweaty tyrant named Mr. Henderson, couldn't scream at her for breathing wrong. She adjusted her apron, wincing as the stiff fabric rubbed against the bruise on her hip, a souvenir from bumping into the industrial freezer earlier that morning. It was raining outside, a cold, miserable November rain that lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Michigan Avenue, but inside, the air was warm and smelled of truffle oil and old money. "Table 4 needs a refire on the ribeye, and stop daydreaming, Miller," Henderson snapped, shoving a tray of crystal glasses into her hands. "And clear section 2. We have a VIP coming in 5 minutes. Security is already sweeping the back." Cassidy felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty kitchen. "VIP? Donovan Ricci," Henderson whispered the name like a curse. "And he's bringing the family. If you drop so much as a spoon, don't bother coming back." The kitchen went silent. Even the head chef, a man who threw knives when he was angry, stopped chopping. Everyone knew the name. Donovan Ricci was the head of the Ricci crime syndicate. He owned half the construction firms in the city and all of the politicians. He was a widower, ruthless, cold, and utterly untouchable. Cassidy swallowed hard, nodding. She needed this job. Her sister's medical bills were piling up on the kitchen counter of their studio apartment, threatening to bury them both. She would serve the devil himself if it meant keeping the lights on. 10 minutes later, the atmosphere in the dining room shifted. It wasn't a noise. It was a sudden, suffocating pressure. 4 men in dark suits entered first, their eyes scanning the room with predatory precision. They took positions at the corners of the room. Then he walked in. Donovan Ricci was taller than he looked in the blurry paparazzi photos. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. His hair was black, swept back severely, revealing a face carved from granite. Sharp jaw, straight nose, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He was terrifyingly handsome, but it was a cold beauty, like a weapon on display. But what caught Cassidy's attention wasn't the man. It was what he was holding. Or rather, who he was holding. Clinging to his left hand was a little girl with curly dark hair, and holding his right was a boy who looked identical to her. The twins, Leo and Mia. They couldn't have been more than 5 years old. They looked small, fragile, and completely out of place in the cavernous, dim restaurant. Donovan guided them to the secluded booth in Cassidy's section. He moved with a protective grace, shielding them from the rest of the room with his body. Cassidy took a deep breath, smoothed her skirt, and approached. "Good evening, Mr. Ricci. My name is Cassidy, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Donovan didn't look at her. He was busy arranging the napkin on his daughter's lap. Sparkling water? No ice. Apple juice for the kids. The Wagyu? Medium rare. Macaroni for them. Fast. He dismissed her with a wave of his hand, as if she were a fly. Cassidy felt the sting of his rudeness, but she forced a smile he didn't see. Of course. As she turned, she saw the little girl, Mia, staring up at her with wide, fearful eyes. The girl had dropped her stuffed rabbit, a worn grey thing with one ear missing. It lay under the table, just out of reach. Donovan was busy typing on his phone, his brow furrowed in anger. He didn't notice the toy falling. Cassidy paused. She knew the rules. Don't interact unless spoken to. But the look on the little girl's face broke her heart. Without a word, Cassidy knelt. She reached under the table, retrieved the rabbit, and gently dusted it off. "Here you go, sweetheart," Cassidy whispered, pressing the toy into Mia's hand. He was just exploring. Mia's face lit up, a tiny smile breaking through her anxiety. "Thank you," she whispered back. "What are you doing?" The voice was low, dangerous, and directly above her. Cassidy froze. She looked up to find Donovan Ritchie staring down at her. His phone was on the table. His eyes were locked on hers, and they were terrifying. She dropped her toy, sir," Cassidy stammered, standing up quickly. "I didn't want her to be upset." Donovan studied her for a second too long. His gaze swept over her frayed uniform, her messy bun, the tired circles under her hazel eyes. He looked at her not as a person, but as a potential threat assessment. "Do your job," he said icily. "Don't play nanny. Just bring the food." "Yes, sir." Cassidy retreated to the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He's a monster," the bartender, a guy named Rick, muttered as he handed her the drinks. "Did you see the way he looked at you? Like he wanted to mount your head on a wall." "He's just protective," Cassidy said, surprising herself. She thought of the way he had positioned himself between the door and his children. He's a father. "He's a butcher, Cass. Don't forget that." Cassidy carried the tray back out. The restaurant was filling up, the noise level rising. She placed the drinks down. Donovan was arguing with someone on the phone in rapid-fire Italian, his knuckles white as he gripped the device. The twins were shrinking into the leather booth, trying to make themselves invisible, just like Cassidy did. She felt a surge of empathy for them. Rich or poor, fear felt the same. She placed a small bowl of strawberries in front of the twins. "On the house," she whispered with a wink, "while you wait for the pasta." Leo, the boy, looked at his father, then snatched a strawberry. Donovan hung up the phone. He looked at the strawberries, then at Cassidy. For a second, the ice in his eyes thawed, just a fraction. "I didn't order those." "They're hungry," Cassidy said, her voice trembling but firm. "Kids get cranky when their blood sugar drops. Trust me, I have a younger sister." Donovan looked like he was about to reprimand her for speaking back. He opened his mouth, but then closed it. He looked at Leo, who was happily chewing. "Fine," Donovan grunted. "Leave." Cassidy turned to the service station, just a few feet away, to punch in an order for another table. She had her back to the window, facing the dining room. That was when she saw it. At the table directly across from the Ricci booth, a man in a tan trench coat was sitting alone. He had been nursing a coffee for 20 minutes. He hadn't ordered food. Cassidy had thought he was waiting for a date. But as she watched, the man reached into his coat. He didn't pull out a wallet. He didn't pull out a phone. The metallic glint under the restaurant's ambient lighting was unmistakable. He was pulling out a gun, a suppressed pistol, and he was raising it not at Donovan, but at the children. Donovan was looking down at his phone again. His bodyguards were watching the front door, distracted by a loud group of drunk businessmen entering the lobby. No one saw the man in the tan coat. No one except the invisible waitress. Time seemed to warp. The sounds of the restaurant, the clinking silverware, the jazz music, the laughter, stretched and distorted. Cassidy didn't think. She didn't calculate the odds. She didn't remember that she was just a waitress making $4.50 an hour, plus tips. She dropped her tray. The crash of breaking glass was the only warning Donovan Ritchie got. "No!" Cassidy screamed, and she launched herself across the gap between the service station and the booth. The sound of the gunshot was softer than Cassidy expected. It wasn't a boom. It was a sickening thwip, like a heavy book being slammed onto a table, but the impact felt like being hit by a sledgehammer. Cassidy had thrown herself over the table, her body colliding with the twins, knocking them backward into the plush leather of the booth. She felt a searing, white-hot line of fire tear through her upper back, near her left shoulder. The momentum carried her down, covering Leo and Mia with her own body. She hit the floor of the booth hard, the breath knocked out of her. Chaos erupted. "Get down!" a bodyguard roared. More shots followed, thwip, thwip, shattering the window above the booth, showering them in safety glass. Beneath her, the twins were screaming, a high-pitched, terrifying sound that pierced through the adrenaline flooding Cassidy's system. "Shh, shh, stay down," Cassidy gasped, her voice ragged. Her shoulder was burning, a pulsing agony that made her vision swim. She pressed their heads down, curling around them like a shield. She could feel their small hearts beating frantically against her chest. "I've got you! I've got you!" Above them, the world had turned into a war zone. She heard the distinct, thundering boom of a larger caliber handgun. Donovan's. 3 shots. Rapid, controlled, deafening. Then silence. Well, not silence. The restaurant was full of screams, sobbing, and the sound of running feet. But the shooting had stopped. "Secure the perimeter! Heavy breach!" someone yelled. Cassidy tried to push herself up, but her left arm wouldn't work. It was numb and heavy. She looked down. Her pristine white apron was soaked in red. It was spreading fast, pooling on the expensive carpet. "Oh," she thought, her mind strangely detached. "That's a lot of blood." Suddenly the weight was lifted off her. Strong hands grabbed her by the waist and pulled her up, but gently, surprisingly gently. She found herself looking into the face of Donovan Ritchie. The composure, the icy mask he wore, was gone. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown. He was breathing hard, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. In his right hand, he held a smoking silver desert eagle. He looked at the twins first. They were huddled in the corner of the booth, covered in glass and strawberry juice, but unharmed. "Papa!" Mia wailed. "Stay there," Donovan commanded, his voice shaking with a rage so potent it vibrated in the air. He turned his attention to Cassidy. He looked at the wound on her shoulder, then at her face. He looked at the waitress he had dismissed, the girl whose name he hadn't even bothered to remember. "You," Donovan whispered. He seemed unable to comprehend what he was seeing. People didn't save him. People didn't save his family. People ran. They hid. They took payoffs to look the other way. "Are they—" Cassidy coughed, and a metallic taste filled her mouth. "Are the kids okay?" Donovan blinked, as if struck. She was bleeding out on the floor of Le Ciel, and she was asking about his children. "They're fine," Donovan said, his voice dropping to a gravelly growl. "Because of you." Cassidy smiled, a weak, trembling thing. "Good. That's good." Her legs gave out. Donovan caught her before she hit the ground. He scooped her up into his arms effortlessly, ignoring the blood soaking into his $3,000 custom suit. "Boss, we have to go. Police are 2 minutes out." His head of security, a giant man named Franco, shouted, rushing over. "The shooter is down. Clean kill. But we don't know if there's a second wave. The hospital," Donovan barked, turning toward the kitchen exit. "Bring the car around back, now." "Boss, we can't take a civilian," Franco argued, grabbing Donovan's arm. "She's a liability. We leave her for the paramedics. If we take her, the cops will link her to us. It's too messy." Donovan stopped. He looked down at Cassidy. Her skin was turning the color of ash. Her eyes were fluttering closed. She gripped his lapel with a bloody hand, her knuckles white. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My sister, she's alone." Donovan looked up at Franco. The look in his eyes made the giant security guard take a step back. It was the look of a man who would burn the city to the ground to get what he wanted. "She took a bullet for my blood," Donovan snarled. "She is my blood now. We take her to St. Jude S. Call Dr. Evans. Tell him if she dies, he dies. Yes, boss. Donovan kicked open the kitchen doors, carrying Cassidy through the screaming cooks and servers. He didn't look back at the chaos he was leaving behind. He held Cassidy tight against his chest. "Stay with me," he ordered her, his voice fierce, close to her ear. "You don't get to die today. Do you hear me? That is an order." Cassidy wanted to answer, to tell him he couldn't order her to live, but the darkness was rushing in from the edges of her vision. The pain was fading, replaced by a cold, heavy numbness. The last thing she felt was the rough fabric of his suit and the frantic pounding of his heart against hers. The last thing she heard was the wail of sirens in the distance, and Donovan Ritchie cursing God in Italian. Then everything went black. The beeping was annoying. It was a rhythmic, high-pitched chirp that drilled into Cassidy's skull, pulling her out of the warm, heavy darkness she wanted to stay in. She tried to move her arm, but it felt like it was made of lead. A sharp pain shot through her shoulder, making her gasp. "Easy, don't move." The voice was familiar, deep, commanding, but quieter than she remembered. Cassidy forced her eyes open. The light was dim. She wasn't in the triage ward of the county hospital, where the curtains were stained and the smell of bleach couldn't hide the smell of sickness. She was in a room that looked more like a hotel suite. Mahogany paneling, a massive flat-screen TV, a leather sofa, and a window overlooking the Chicago skyline at night. She turned her head. Sitting in a chair next to her bed, illuminated by the glow of a tablet, was Donovan Ritchie. He had changed out of his blood-soaked suit. He was wearing a black dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms covered in intricate tattoos, vines and thorns wrapping around daggers. He looked exhausted. Stubble shadowed his jaw, and his eyes were red-rimmed. "Mr. Ritchie," Cassidy croaked. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Donovan set the tablet down immediately. He poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher and held the straw to her lips. His hand, she noticed, was shaking ever so slightly. "Drink," he said. She drank greedily. When she finished, she leaned back against the pillows, the memories rushing back. The gun, the twins, the blood. "The kids?" she asked instantly. Donovan stared at her. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "At a safe house. They haven't stopped asking about you. Mia thinks you're Superwoman." "I'm really not." Cassidy managed a weak laugh that turned into a grimace of pain. "I'm just a waitress who panicked." "Panic makes people run away, Cassidy," Donovan said. He used her name. It sounded strange coming from him. "It doesn't make them jump in front of a .45 caliber round." He stood up and walked to the foot of the bed. He looked like a caged animal, powerful, restless, and dangerous. "I ran a background check on you while you were in surgery," he said flatly. Cassidy stiffened. "You did what?" "Cassidy Miller, 24. Parents died in a car wreck 4 years ago. You dropped out of nursing school to take care of your sister, Sophie, who has cystic fibrosis." He recited the facts without emotion, but his eyes were watching her reaction closely. "You have $60,000 in medical debt. You work 2 jobs. You live in a studio apartment in the South Loop that has 3 code violations." Cassidy felt a flush of shame heat her cheeks. She hated being exposed. "Is that a crime? Being poor?" "No," Donovan said. He walked around to the side of the bed, leaning down so his face was level with hers. "But it makes what you did illogical. You have everything to lose. You have a dependent who needs you. And yet, you risked your life for 2 children you don't know, belonging to a man who treated you like garbage." The air in the room grew heavy. Donovan's expression was tortured. He looked like a man trying to solve a puzzle that had no solution. "Why?" he demanded softly. "Why did you do it?" Cassidy looked at him. She saw the fear behind the anger. She saw a father who had almost lost his world. "Because they're children, Mr. Ritchie," she said simply, "and no one else was moving." Donovan stared at her for a long time. The silence stretched, filled only by the beeping of the monitor. "You saved my life," he said, his voice rough. "If that bullet had hit Mia, if I had lost them—" He couldn't finish the sentence. He looked away, clenching his jaw. "But you didn't," Cassidy said gently. Donovan looked back at her. The hardness in his eyes cracked, revealing something raw. "No, I didn't. Because of you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. Not his, hers. The screen was cracked. "Your sister called. About 10 times, he said. "I answered the last one. I told her you had an accident at work, but you were stable. I have a car picking her up now. She's coming here." "Here?" Cassidy panicked. "I can't afford this room. I can't even afford the ambulance ride. Mr. Ricci, I have to go to County General. Stop." Donovan held up a hand. "You aren't paying for anything. Ever again." "What? You took a bullet for the Ricci family," Donovan said, his voice taking on that tone of absolute authority again. "You are under my protection now. Your debts are cleared. Your sister's medical bills are paid in full. The doctors here are the best in the country, and they work for me." Cassidy was stunned. "I can't accept that. That's too much." "It's not enough," Donovan said intensely. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers on the bedsheet, before he finally covered her hand with his. His skin was warm, his grip firm. "You are not going back to that diner. You are not going back to that apartment. Until I find out who ordered that hit. You are a target because you're the only witness who saw the shooter's face up close. You're coming home with me." "Home with you?" Cassidy's heart skipped a beat. "You mean, to the estate," Donovan said, "where I can see you, where I can keep you safe." "Mr. Ricci, Donovan," he corrected her. "Call me Donovan." He squeezed her hand, a silent vow. "Get some rest, Cassidy. You're going to need your strength, because I'm not letting you out of my sight until I know you're safe." He turned and walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. "And Cassidy?" "Yes?" He looked back over his shoulder. The look he gave her made her breath hitch. It wasn't the look of a boss or a Mafia don. It was the look of a man who had found something precious he didn't know he was looking for. "Thank you." He slipped out the door, leaving Cassidy alone in the silence, her hand still tingling where he had touched it. She realized then that saving the children might have been the easy part. Surviving Donovan Ricci's gratitude might be the thing that truly changed her life. The Ricci estate was not a home. It was a fortress disguised as a palace. Located in the affluent suburb of Highland Park, it was surrounded by 12-foot iron gates, cameras that swiveled like predatory birds, and enough armed security to invade a small country. Cassidy stood in the foyer, her left arm in a sling, staring up at a chandelier that probably cost more than her entire lifetime of earnings. Beside her, Sophie sat in a mechanized wheelchair, one of the many gifts Donovan had ordered, looking around with wide, terrified eyes. "It's a museum," Sophie whispered, clutching her oxygen tank. "Cass, are we allowed to touch anything? Or will a sniper take us out?" "Don't touch anything," Cassidy muttered, though she was thinking the same thing. Franco, the head of security, stood by the door like a stone statue. "Mr. Ricci is in a meeting. He instructed that you be shown to the East Wing. It has been retrofitted for your sister's medical needs." They were led through hallways lined with oil paintings of frowning ancestors. The house was beautiful, cold, and utterly silent. It felt like a mausoleum. But as they passed the grand staircase, the silence was shattered. A scream echoed from the upper floor, then the sound of crashing porcelain. "No! Go away!" It was Leo. Franco sighed, checking his watch. The nannies are having trouble. The children have been difficult since the incident. Cassidy didn't wait for permission. She turned towards the stairs. "Miss Miller, you need to rest," Franco warned, stepping in front of her. The doctor said, "Get out of my way, Franco," Cassidy said. Her voice was quiet, but there was a steel in it that surprised even her. "Those kids are hurting." She maneuvered past the giant man and climbed the stairs, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. She followed the shouting to a nursery that was bigger than her old apartment. Inside, it was chaos. 2 women in starch-stiff uniforms were trying to coax Leo out from under a bed. Mia was sitting in the middle of the room, sobbing, clutching the grey rabbit Cassidy had saved. A vase of flowers lay shattered on the floor. "Come out this instant, Master Leo," one of the nannies snapped. "Your father will not tolerate this behavior." "Get out," Cassidy said from the doorway. The nannies turned. "Excuse me? We are certified professionals from the—" "I don't care." Cassidy walked into the room. She knelt on the floor, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. "You're scaring them. Leave, now." Franco appeared in the doorway behind her. He nodded once at the nannies. They huffed, gathered their things, and marched out. The room fell quiet, save for Mia's hiccups. Cassidy didn't try to pull Leo out. She just sat on the rug near the bed. She looked at Mia. "Hey, sweetie, remember me?" Mia sniffled, wiping her nose. "The strawberry lady." Cassidy smiled. "That's me. And this is my friend." She gestured to her sling. "Mr. Arm. He's having a lazy day." Mia giggled weakly. Cassidy turned her head slightly toward the bed. "Leo, I heard you have a pretty strong throwing arm. You took out that vase like a pro." Silence from under the bed. Then a small voice. "I didn't mean to. I was scared." "I know," Cassidy said softly. "I get scared too. Loud noises are the worst." Slowly, Leo crawled out. His face was tear-streaked. He looked so much like his father, but without the hardened mask. "Did the bad man hurt you?" Leo asked, pointing to a sling. "He tried, but I'm tough." Cassidy winked. "And your dad?" He made sure the bad man went away. "Papa is scary," Mia whispered. "Papa is strong," Cassidy corrected. "He has to be scary to the bad guys so he can be nice to you. It's like a dragon. A dragon breathes fire at enemies, but he uses his wings to keep his babies warm, right?" The twins looked at each other. They seemed to consider this logic. "Can you stay?" Leo asked. "The other ladies smell like old soap. You smell like vanilla." "I can stay for a bit," Cassidy promised. 2 hours later, Donovan Ricci stood in the doorway of the nursery. He had rushed out of a meeting with the heads of the 5 families when Franco texted him. Situation with the children. He expected tears. He expected tantrums. He expected to have to fire another nanny. Instead, he found peace. The room was dim, lit only by a nightlight. Cassidy was sitting in the rocking chair, her good arm holding a storybook. Leo and Mia were asleep, actually asleep, curled up on the rug at her feet, wrapped in a duvet like burritos. Cassidy was humming a lullaby. It wasn't a classic song. It sounded like something pop, slowed down to a ballad. Donovan felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt since his wife, Isabella, died 3 years ago. He watched the way the soft light caught the loose strands of Cassidy's hair. She looked tired, pale, and fragile, yet she commanded the room with a gentle power he couldn't comprehend. She looked up and saw him. She put a finger to her lips. Donovan walked in, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. He looked down at his children. Their faces were relaxed. No nightmares. "How?" he whispered. "They just needed to know they weren't alone," Cassidy whispered back. She closed the book. "They're terrified, Donovan. They think every shadow has a gun." "I will burn the city down to find who did this," Donovan said, the darkness creeping back into his voice. "They don't need a city on fire," Cassidy said, meeting his gaze. "They need their dad. They need you to read them a book, not a police report." Donovan stiffened. No one spoke to him like that. "I am doing what is necessary to protect them." "You're protecting their bodies," Cassidy challenged him, standing up carefully. "Who is protecting their hearts?" They stood inches apart. The air between them crackled with tension. Donovan could smell the vanilla Leo had mentioned. It was intoxicating. He wanted to be angry at her insolence, but he couldn't, because she was right. "I don't know how," Donovan admitted. the confession torn from his throat. I forgot how. Cassidy's expression softened. She reached out, her hand hovering near his arm, before dropping it. It comes back. Just sit with them. Watch them breathe. She moved to leave, but Donovan caught her good hand. His grip was electric. "Stay," he said. It was the same command he had given at the hospital, but the tone was different. It was a plea. "The nannies, they are useless. Stay with them. Be their governess. Name your price." Cassidy looked at their joined hands. "I'm a waitress, Donovan. I don't know how to be a governess." "You aren't a waitress anymore," Donovan said intensely. "You are the only person they trust. And," he hesitated, his grey eyes searching hers, "you are the only one who doesn't look at me with fear." Cassidy felt her heart hammer against her ribs. "I'm terrified of you." "Liar," Donovan murmured. He stepped closer, towering over her. "If you were scared, you would have run. You're still here." "My sister needs the care," she deflected. "Is that the only reason?" Cassidy couldn't answer. The magnetic pull of the man was overwhelming. He was dangerous, lethal, and broken. And she had a terrible habit of trying to fix broken things. "I'll do it," she whispered. "For the kids." Donovan nodded slowly. He didn't let go of her hand for a long moment. "Good. Start tomorrow. Franco will move your things to the suite next to theirs." He let her go. Cassidy hurried out of the room, her breath coming in short gasps. She leaned against the wall in the hallway, touching her chest. She had survived a gunshot wound, but she wasn't sure she would survive living under the same roof as Donovan Ricci. 2 weeks passed. Life at the estate fell into a strange, domestic rhythm. Cassidy spent her days with the twins, finger-painting, reading, and teaching them how to bake cookies in the industrial kitchen, much to the horror of the French chef Jean-Luc. Sophie was thriving. The medical care Donovan provided was state-of-the-art. She had gained weight, and the color was returning to her cheeks. She spent her days in the sunroom, reading or chatting with the younger security guards, who seemed to have developed a collective crush on her. Donovan was a ghost. He left before dawn and returned after midnight. Cassidy only saw him in passing, a dark silhouette in the hallway, a brooding figure on the balcony. Until the night of the winter solstice gala. It was a mandatory event for Chicago's elite. Politicians, judges, and business tycoons would be there. It was also, according to Franco, a shark tank. Cassidy was in the playroom building a Lego castle with Leo when the door opened. A team of 3 women marched in, carrying garment bags and makeup cases. "Miss Miller," the leader, a sharp woman named Claude, announced. "Mr. Ricci sent us. We have 3 hours." "3 hours for what?" Cassidy asked, confused. "For the gala. You are attending." Cassidy stood up. "No, I'm not. I'm the nanny. I stay here." "Mr. Ricci insists," Claude said, unzipping a bag to reveal a gown of emerald green silk. "He requires a companion, and he trusts no one else." An hour later, Cassidy didn't recognize herself in the mirror. The dress was a masterpiece. It hugged her curves and flowed to the floor like liquid water. The emerald color made her hazel eyes pop. The makeup artists had covered the dark circles under her eyes, and her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon. The sling was gone, replaced by a discreet silk wrap that concealed the healing wound. When she walked down the grand staircase, Donovan was waiting at the bottom. He was talking to Franco, adjusting his cufflinks. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw her. The silence in the foyer was absolute. Donovan's eyes traveled from the hem of her dress to her face. He didn't smile. Donovan Ricci didn't smile, but his pupils dilated, swallowing the grey irises. "You look." He cleared his throat, struggling for a word. "Adequate." Cassidy rolled her eyes, descending the last few steps. "Charming as always, boss. Do I have to carry a concealed weapon? Or is the dress lethal enough?" Donovan stepped forward, offering his arm. "With looks like that, Cassidy, you are the weapon." Stay close to me tonight. Do not leave my side. Not for a drink, not for the bathroom. The people in this room, they smile with their teeth. The gala was held at the Chicago Art Institute. It was a sea of diamonds, champagne, and fake laughter. As they entered, the room went quiet. All eyes turned to Donovan Ritchie and the mystery woman on his arm. Cassidy felt the weight of the stares. "They're staring," she whispered. "Let them," Donovan said, pulling her closer against his side. His hand rested on the small of her back, a burning point of contact. "They smell fear. Walk like you own the place." "I can't even afford the parking here," she muttered, but she straightened her spine. For the first hour, it was a blur of handshakes and veiled threats. Donovan introduced her simply as Cassidy, offering no explanation. The ambiguity drove the gossip mongers wild. They were near the ice sculpture when a man approached. He was older, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wore a tuxedo that looked expensive but flashy. "Donovan!" the man boomed, spreading his arms. "I didn't think you'd show your face. Not after the mess at the restaurant." Donovan stiffened. "Victor, I see you're still breathing. Disappointing." This was Victor Moretti, the head of the rival family. Victor laughed, a dry, rasping sound. His eyes slid to Cassidy. He looked her up and down now in a way that made her skin crawl. "And who is this? A new plaything? You go through them so fast since Isabella." "Careful, Victor." Donovan's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You are on thin ice." Victor stepped closer, invading Cassidy's personal space. He reached out to take her hand. Cassidy saw a ring on his pinky finger, a heavy gold signet ring with a crest of a two-headed snake. She froze. Flashback. The restaurant. The man in the tan coat. He had raised the gun, but before that, someone had signaled him. A man sitting at the bar. He had raised a hand to check his watch. On his pinky finger, a gold ring with a two-headed snake. Cassidy pulled her hand back as if burned. "Don't touch me." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Feisty." "We're leaving," Donovan said. He placed a hand on Cassidy's back to guide her away, but she was rooted to the spot. "It was him," she whispered. Donovan stopped. "What? The ring?" Cassidy hissed, her voice trembling. "The man at the bar, the one who signaled the shooter, he was wearing that ring." Donovan went still. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. He turned slowly back to Victor Moretti. Victor's smile faltered. He saw the realization in Donovan's eyes. He saw the predator awakening. "Donovan, wait," Victor started. "You targeted my children," Donovan said. It wasn't a question. It was a death sentence spoken in a crowded room. Victor panicked. He snapped his fingers. Suddenly, 4 waiters dropped their trays and reached into their jackets. "Down!" Donovan roared. He shoved Cassidy behind a marble pillar just as the first shot rang out. The gala dissolved into pandemonium. Screams, shattering glass. The rich and powerful scrambled over each other like rats. Donovan pulled a gun from a holster hidden beneath his jacket. He returned fire, dropping one of the fake waiters. "Franco, secure the exit," Donovan yelled into his comms. "Cassidy, look at me." He grabbed her face, his hands covered in someone else's blood. "Run to the kitchen, the back exit. Franco is there with the car. Go." "I'm not leaving you," Cassidy shouted over the gunfire. "You have to. If they get you, they have leverage on me. Go." He pushed her towards the service doors. Cassidy stumbled, hiking up her dress, and ran. She burst into the kitchen, dodging panicked chefs. She made it to the loading dock, but Franco wasn't there. Instead, a black van screeched to a halt. The side door slid open. 2 men in ski masks jumped out. Cassidy tried to fight. She kicked, she screamed, she clawed, but they were too strong. One of them clamped a chloroformed rag over her face. The world tilted. The last thing she saw was the back door of the Art Institute bursting open and Donovan Ritchie running out, screaming her name. Donovan Ritchie had never felt fear. He felt anger. He felt calculation. He felt grief. But he had never felt the icy, paralyzing grip of pure terror until he saw the black van peel away. taking Cassidy with it. He stood in the rain in the alleyway, his chest heaving, his gun hanging uselessly at his side. "Boss!" Franco ran out, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. "They blocked the perimeter. We lost them." Donovan turned on him. In a blur of motion, he grabbed Franco by the throat and slammed him against the brick wall. "Find her," Donovan snarled, spittle flying. "Tear this city apart. I don't care about the treaties. I don't care about the police. Bring me Victor Moretti's head and find Cassidy." "We're tracking the van's plates," Franco choked out. "GPS says the docks, warehouse district." Donovan released him. "Get the car." Cassidy woke up tied to a chair. Her head was pounding, and the taste of chemicals was heavy in her mouth. She was in a dimly lit room that smelled of fish and rust. Victor Moretti was sitting on a crate in front of her, smoking a cigar. "You have caused me a lot of trouble, waitress," Victor said. "If you had just let those brats die, Donovan would be broken. He would be weak. I could have taken the city." "You're sick," Cassidy spat. "I'm a businessman," Victor shrugged. "And now, you are my insurance policy. Donovan will trade anything for his savior." "He won't come for me," Cassidy lied, though her heart was praying she was wrong. "I'm just the nanny." "Please," Victor laughed. "I saw the way he looked at you. Donovan Ricci hasn't looked at a woman like that since his wedding day. You are his weakness." Suddenly the lights in the warehouse flickered. Then they went out completely. "What is that?" Victor yelled. "Tony, check the generator." Silence. "Tony?" Thump. The sound of a body hitting the floor. "Marco!" Victor shouted, pulling his gun. Crack! The sound of bone breaking. Cassidy held her breath. The darkness was alive. She could hear movement. Fast, silent, lethal. It wasn't a team. It was one man. Victor started firing blindly into the dark. The muzzle flashes illuminated the terror on his face. "Show yourself, Ricci!" A shadow detached itself from the gloom behind Victor. "You shouldn't have touched her," a voice whispered from the darkness. Victor spun around, but he was too slow. Donovan was there. He moved with a brutality that was terrifying to watch. He disarmed Victor with a snap of a wrist, kicked his knee backward, and slammed his face into the concrete floor. The remaining guards rushed in, but Donovan's men, Franco and a dozen others, breached the doors, weapons blazing. The firefight lasted seconds. The Moretti crew was decimated. Donovan didn't look at the carnage. He walked straight to Cassidy. He holstered his gun and pulled a knife. For a second, Cassidy flinched, but he only sliced the ropes binding her wrists and ankles. As soon as she was free, she fell forward. Donovan caught her. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent, checking for a pulse, for warmth. He was shaking. The great Donovan Ricci was shaking. "Did he hurt you?" he demanded, pulling back to scan her face. "Did he touch you?" "I'm okay," Cassidy sobbed. The adrenaline crashing. "I'm okay. You came." "I will always come for you," Donovan swore. He picked her up, bridal style, and carried her out of the warehouse. The rain was pouring down, washing the blood from the pavement. He placed her in the back of his armored SUV. But instead of moving to the other side, he climbed in with her, signaling Franco to drive. The partition went up. They were alone. "You were stupid," Donovan growled, though his hands were gently running over her arms, checking for injuries. "I told you to run to the car. I wasn't going to leave you to die," Cassidy argued, her voice rising. "That's not what partners do." "We are not partners," Donovan yelled, slamming his hand against the leather seat. "I am a monster, Cassidy. Look at me. I am covered in blood. This is my life. Death follows me. You were supposed to stay away." "Then why did you bring me to your house?" Cassidy yelled back. "Why did you make me feel safe? Why do you look at me like that?" "Because I can't help it," Donovan roared. He stared at her, his chest heaving. The anger drained out of him, leaving only desperation. "Because," he whispered, "you are the only light I have left." Cassidy looked at him, the blood on his collar, the pain in his eyes. She didn't see a monster. She saw a man who was drowning. She reached out and cupped his face. His stubble was rough against her palm. "Then don't let go," she said. Donovan let out a ragged breath. He leaned into her touch. Then, unable to resist any longer, he closed the distance. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, hungry, and possessive. It tasted of rain and danger and relief. Cassidy melted into him, wrapping her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. There was only this, the fire between them. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Donovan rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to end this," he promised Darky. "Tonight. Moretti is done. The families will fall in line. And then I am taking you and the kids away. To Italy. To the coast. Somewhere they can't find us." Cassidy smiled, tracing his lip with her thumb. "Italy sounds nice." The car slowed down as they approached the estate gates. But as they pulled up to the main house, something was wrong. The front door was open. Franco's voice crackled over the intercom. "Boss, the perimeter alarm is off. Someone disarmed it from the inside." Donovan went cold. "The kids!" He threw the door open before the car fully stopped. He ran into the house, Cassidy right behind him. The foyer was empty. No guards. "Leo, MIA!" Donovan screamed. There was no answer. They ran up the stairs to the nursery. The door was open. The room was empty. The beds were unmade. But on the floor, in the center of the room, sat Sophie. She was sitting in her wheelchair, facing the door. She was crying silently. And standing behind her, a gun pressed to Sophie's head, was a man Cassidy knew. A man she had trusted. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a Moretti soldier. It was Uncle Salvatore, Donovan's father's brother. The man who sat at Sunday dinners. The man who brought the kids candy. "Hello, nephew," Sal smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. "You really should be more careful about who you let into the henhouse." "Where are they, Sal?" Donovan's voice was a low, terrifying vibration. "Where are my children?" "Safe," Sal said. "For now, as long as you sign the papers handing the territory over to me. I told Victor he was too impatient. I told him the only way to kill a lion is to steal his cubs first." Cassidy stepped forward. "Please, let them go. Take me instead." Sal laughed. "Oh, my dear, you're the reason this was so easy." Donovan was so distracted by his pretty little angel that he didn't notice his own uncle paying off the gate guards. Sal cocked the hammer of the gun against Sophie's temple. "Drop the gun, Donovan," Sal ordered, "or the sister dies first." Donovan hesitated. He looked at Cassidy. He saw the sheer terror in her eyes, not for herself, but for her sister. Slowly, Donovan bent down and placed his gun on the floor. He kicked it toward Sal. "Smart boy," Sal grinned. "Now, let's talk business." The silence in the nursery was deafening. Uncle Sal stood behind Sophie, the cold barrel of his gun pressed against her temple. Donovan Ritchie, the most feared man in Chicago, was on his knees, stripped of his power by the threat to his family. "The dumbwaiter," Sal sneered, his eyes manic. "I stuffed the twins in the old service shaft. The cables are rusted, Donovan. If I don't punch in the code, the brakes release, and they drop 4 floors to the basement concrete." Cassidy felt the blood drain from her face. "You monster," she whispered. "The tablet," Sal ordered, kicking an iPad toward Donovan. "Transfer the assets. All of it. Then I give you the code." Donovan moved to comply, willing to burn his empire to save his children. But Cassidy saw something Sal didn't. Sophie, terrified but observant, was resting her hand on her wheelchair's speed dial. She tapped it to max. She locked eyes with Cassidy. "Get ready." "Donovan, hurry!" Cassidy screamed, stepping forward to draw Sal's attention. "Just give it to him!" "Back off!" Sal shouted, shifting his aim slightly toward Cassidy. "Now!" Cassidy yelled. Sophie slammed the joystick forward. The heavy motorized chair lurched, ramming into Sal's shins with a sickening crunch. Sal howled, his gun firing wildly into the ceiling as he lost his balance. Donovan launched himself. He tackled Sal, slamming him into the wall. "Run!" Donovan roared to Cassidy. "Get the kids! Kitchen pantry!" Cassidy didn't look back at the brutal fight ensuing behind her. She sprinted to the kitchen, grabbing a heavy cast-iron skillet. The pantry door was painted shut. With a primal scream, she swung the skillet, shattering the lock, and kicked the door open. Inside the dark shaft, the wooden box holding the twins hung by a fraying wire. Snap! The box dropped inches. "Cassidy!" Mia sobbed from the darkness. "I'm here!" Cassidy leaned into the shaft. It was too deep to reach them. "Leo, you have to jump! I'll catch you!" Terrified, the boy slid out. Cassidy caught him, lowering him to the floor. "Mia, now, come on!" The final cable strand began to unravel. Mia threw herself from the box just as the wire snapped. Cassidy caught her, the momentum knocking them both onto the kitchen tiles. A split second later, a thunderous crash shook the house as the heavy wooden box pulverized against the basement floor. They were safe. Cassidy held the trembling children until the silence returned. When she finally walked back to the nursery, the violence was over. Sal lay unconscious on the floor. Donovan stood by the window, bruised and bleeding, but alive. He crossed the room in 3 strides, falling to his knees to wrap his arms around Cassidy's waist, burying his face in her stomach. "It's over," he whispered, shaking. "I promise you, Cassidy. It is finally over." 6 months later. The sun over Lake Como was golden, far warmer than the grey skies of Chicago. Cassidy stood on the terrace of a private villa, watching the scene below. Leo and Mia were covered in flour, chasing a golden retriever puppy through the lemon trees. Sophie sat in the shade, looking healthier than she had in years, laughing as the French chef chased the children. Donovan stood at the terrace railing, looking out at the sparkling water. The tension that had defined him for years was gone. He wore a linen shirt, his posture relaxed. He was still a king, but he had traded his kingdom of concrete for a paradise of peace. Cassidy approached him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Thinking about work? Thinking about luck?" Donovan turned, his grey eyes soft. "The odds of a man like me walking into a restaurant and finding an angel." "I'm not an angel," she smiled, "just stubborn. You're everything." Donovan reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, vintage platinum with a deep blue sapphire. He dropped to one knee. "Cassidy Miller," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my children. You saved my life. But mostly, you saved my soul. I want to spend every sunrise proving I'm worthy of you. Will you marry me?" Cassidy looked at the ring, then at the happy chaos in the garden. She looked at the man who would burn the world to keep them safe. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times yes. As he kissed her, Leo shouted from the garden, "Look, Papa is kissing Cassidy." "Finally," Sophie cheered, raising her glass. In the golden Italian light, the waitress and the Mafia boss stood together, not as a tragedy, but as a family. Cassidy and Donovan's story proves that the strongest armor isn't Kevlar, but love. Donovan thought he needed soldiers, but he needed someone brave enough to heal his broken family. Cassidy didn't just take a bullet. She took a chance on a monster and found a man. In the end, the invisible girl became the heart of the Ricci Empire, proving that true power isn't about fear. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice for the ones you love. And that is the ending of the waitress who stole the Mafia boss's heart. I loved Sophie's surprise hero moment. Did you see that coming? If you enjoyed this series, please smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next romance drama. Let me know in the comments. Was Donovan's proposal perfect, or should he have done it in Chicago? Thanks for watching.